Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. As transatlantic trade tensions rise, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is in Washington and has concluded a high-stakes meeting with President Donald Trump. With EU-US relations strained over tariffs and Italy's economy in a vulnerable spot, Meloni is attempting to secure a tariff trade deal that could shift the EU's diplomatic trajectory. Joining us to explore the implications of this visit is Tanya Domi. She's Adjunct Professor of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. Welcome, Professor. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Now, before we kick off, there's a short soundbite that I'd like to share with you, and then I'll get your view on it.
Of course, we support Prime Minister Meloni. She represents a responsible and ethical approach when it comes to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. When it comes to this issue, as well as the issue regarding tariffs, I hope she will convince President Trump.
So that was Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski there speaking quite optimistically about Giorgia Meloni's visit to Washington. Do you share his optimism?
Well, it was an interesting meeting because it opened up with President Trump saying he liked her very much. He considered her a good friend, and opened with a dangling offer, or perhaps a deal, 100% with Europe before the end of the 90-day pause that's anticipated later this spring. And he offered assurances that he'd make a deal with China too. But she reiterated at a number of times that, she was not negotiating on behalf of the EU, but welcomed the opportunity to speak on that. And she announced that she would be willing to host a meeting in Italy with President Trump and other European leaders. And as a matter of fact, she extended an official invitation to visit Italy soon.
Right. So a number of interesting points you raised there. Now, you say, first of all, that she and President Trump clearly, get on well. She attended President Trump's inauguration, and he clearly has a great deal of respect for her. Does that put her in a good position to negotiate, if not on behalf of the EU, but on behalf of Italy and tariff barriers to trade between Italy and the US, considering 10% of Italy's exports go to the US?
Oh, I think so. And as a matter of fact, she reinforced him in a very flattering way. She said, well, we have this, you and I agree that one of my missions is to make the West great again, pivoting off, his iconic brand about making America great again, and said, we agree about, combating against this woke culture and DEI, and you and I agree. And when you compare his interaction with Meloni compared to Merkel in the recent past, it was so hostile, and this was very amicable, very amicable.
Right. Now, although she isn't negotiating on behalf of the EU, of course, as we've just heard, Poland and other EU countries, Ursula von der Leyen and so on, did confer with her, or she conferred with them, before her visit. What do you think those conversations were about?
Well, it sounds like they talked about. They also talked about bilateral issues. They discussed energy. They discussed trade. They discussed investments. And she even, I think, stretched the truth a bit, but said, they were making progress on meeting NATO's goals. of 2% of GDP, but Mr. Trump has actually moved that to 5% that he's been demanding, and Italy's been pretty slow on that, but he didn't seem to have any issue with that. And he also, but when asked also, now this is interesting too, she was asked about her view on the war in Ukraine, and she said it was very clear that Ukraine was invaded by Russia and Vladimir Putin. And he didn't push back on that. And she said, I look forward to working with you on creating a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. And he said, well, you know, we're doing better on that score. And he actually announced that the Secretary of the Treasury is negotiating with Ukrainian officials, and they're soon to announce a deal on rare earth minerals this coming week.
Right. Well, I mean, the rare earth conversation has been going on a while,
Yes,
and
of
a lot of it, of course, behind closed doors. But what's the sense you get? You said President Trump didn't push back on what Meloni said about Russia's aggression. Are you getting a sense that Trump's view towards Putin is changing?
Well, the last several comments have been kind of negative, actually, and, you know, said that the killing needs to stop and that many, you know, thousands of people are dying every week. And he does say that pretty regularly, but his last comment was that he was unhappy with Putin, and many people were surprised by that. And then also he actually said something for Trump is President Trump is very positive. He says he doesn't blame the Ukrainian president, Mr. Zelensky, for the war in Ukraine, but he went on to attack him in a backhanded way. He said, "But I'm not a fan." But it wasn't an out all, you know, full-on attack. It was much softer, and I think she actually helped with the approach there. He did not push back on her, and I would think that you know, the defense minister and the foreign minister in Poland would be pleased with that diplomatic speak. That was positive, I think,
Indeed.
for Trump in recent weeks.
Indeed. Now, in terms of the timing, you know, this visit has taken place before, of course, the end of the 90-day suspension of tariffs. Do we expect the tariffs to be removed based on these conversations? And will they be only removed or adjusted for Italy, or do you think there's going to be an EU-wide effect?
Well, it sounds like from what she said is that she would include other European leaders in this meeting, and there was no pushback on it. And he said, well, 100%, there will be a deal before the 90-day pause is up. That's pretty strong for him, not to say that he can't change his mind, because we know he changes his mind every day, every week. However, I think he showed comfort. I think he was comfortable in her presence and called her a very good friend, was very laudatory. And I think the most laudatory towards she received more compliments than any other European leader I've heard him speak of in recent weeks, for sure.
Right. Well, I mean, does this actually indicate a risk as well within the EU that nations are now going to go their own ways in terms of organizing, you know, deals, whether they be trade or other, with the US or other countries? What do you think?
Well, it seems like she's trying to position herself in Italy to get a deal on the tariffs. And perhaps if she includes her European friends, everybody won't be scrambling on their own. Perhaps the EU might, work with her in a strategy that would benefit the EU instead of everybody for themselves in this difficult position to try to get these tariffs pulled and or actually diminished.
Now, another area of agreement between Prime Minister Meloni and President Trump, of course, is the area of illegal immigration into both those countries. Do you think that that formed part of their conversation? And did Meloni take something away on that from their meeting, in your opinion?
Well, it's very clear they both agree that migration's a problem, and she spoke of the fentanyl issue, fighting against fentanyl, which has been part of his mission in the United States. And of course, I am aware of the Italy-Albania agreement on holding migrants in Albania as an example. Yes, I think these issues are similar. They have similar views on migration and the way they approach it. And of course, in Europe, I think with migrants were coming from Syria in past years up through the Balkans. They did everything they can to keep migrants out of the Schengen zone. So I think these are similar. They're similar dynamics, and both of them are definitely anti illegal migration, but perhaps stretching that in the case of Trump, because many people have entered the country legally, and yet they're still deporting them. I don't know that they share similar views on that.
Right.
But there definitely is a commonality there between these two leaders.
Just very quickly, if you would, Professor, if you zoom out and have a look at the big picture, there are some areas where actually there's opportunity for greater closeness between the EU and US, and some areas which need to be sorted out, for example, defence spending. Do you see a new relationship between the EU and US going forward as a result of this?
Of this meeting with Meloni, or
the general picture as it is at the moment? Yes.
Well, I think Ukraine could shift the dynamics for sure, and into that war would help Europe and would certainly benefit the United States. This is a big drain on everyone's budgets, and for whatever we might say about Mr. Trump, he does speak about ending the killing repeatedly. And I know that also is on the forefront of thinking by European leaders. To get a war ended on the European continent has to help the Europeans without question. Right. And the concern in the Baltics and the surrounding areas, Central Europe, Poland, everyone is deeply, deeply concerned about this war.
Indeed.
And I think that would really bring the temperature down.
Well, we certainly look forward to that happening. Professor Domi, thank you very much indeed for sharing your analysis with our audience. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
And that's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.